Alright, this is the install for the JK body-mounted tire carrier. We always recommend you park the Jeep on a flat, level surface and set the parking brake. Also, wear safety glasses from this point on. Remove the stock spare tire carrier if it is present. It is recommended that a Poison Spyder tramp stamp or tramp stamp 2 be installed in its place to clean up the appearance of the tailgate. However, this is not necessary for installation of the tire carrier. Use a 7mm nut driver to remove the license plate from the stock license plate holder if it is present. Remove the plastic license plate holder from the Jeep. With the license plate holder unbolted, disconnect the license plate light pigtail from the Jeep's wiring harness by pressing on the release tab on the plastic connector and pulling them apart. Tuck the Jeep's wiring harness back into the Jeep, pop out the plastic screw retainers, and install the license plate delete cover into the hole left in the Jeep's body. Use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove the driver's side taillight assembly. It is only necessary to remove the screws from the top inside and bottom inside corners. The 2 screws in the outside corners may be left in place. With the screws removed, grasp the taillight assembly and gently shift it toward the inboard side of the Jeep and pull it away. Disconnect the taillight assembly from the Jeep's vehicle wiring harness by pressing the release tab and separating the 2 plastic plugs. Set the taillight aside. Find "This Side Up" etched into the latch plate drill template. Hold the template up to the Jeep's body between the taillight and the tailgate with the letters away from the Jeep and the arrow pointing up as shown. Adjust the position of the drill template so that the top edge is even with the point where the body tube begins to curve inward. Align the right side of the template approximately so that it is even with the point where the small curve begins at the edge of the tailgate opening. Use a fine-tip felt marker to mark each of the hole locations in the template. Use an auto punch or manual punch with a small hammer to punch the hole locations. You're just creating a small indentation for the drill to start in without wandering. Don't try to punch all the way through. And try not to hit the sheet metal hard enough to dent it other than the small indent needed to pilot the drill. Drill each of the 7 hole locations to a finished hole size of 25/64. It is recommended to start with a pilot hole of around 3/16 before stepping up to the finished hole size. Be careful when drilling as the sheet metal is very thin and may want to catch on the drill flutes. Note that the body tub in this location is double wall, so you will be drilling through 2 layers of sheet metal. In the hardware pack, find the 2 alignment cones, 2 1/4-20 by 1 1/4 flathead cap screws, 2 1/4-20 nylon insert lock nuts, and 2 1/4-inch grade 8 flat washers. Use the flathead cap screws, washers, and lock nuts to attach the alignment cones to the front side of the latch plate. On the back side of the latch plate, a corresponding larger hole is provided to allow access with a 7/16" deep socket to install and tighten the flat washer and lock nut. Use a 5/32" hex key to hold the flathead screw in place while tightening the nut. As this is a pre-installation and the components will be removed for paint or powder coat prior to the final installation, apply some masking tape to the back side of the latch plate to protect the Jeep's paint finish during the pre-installation process. Install the latch plate to the Jeep, starting with the 2 center bolt locations. Use a 3/8 by 1 1/2 grade 8 hex head cap screw, flat washer, and lock nut at each hole location. Use a 9/16 socket with a ratchet and a 9/16 box wrench inside of the body tub to tighten these bolts. Tighten until the bolts are just barely snugged so that the latch plate may still be shifted from side to side on the elongated bolt holes. Install the upper and lower latch plate braces. In this illustration, we've made the Jeep's body tub transparent to show how these pieces fit together inside the corner cavity of the body. The taillight hole allows access to the interior cavity of the body tub. Each of the latch plate braces attaches to the latch plate with 2 3/8 by 1 1/2 grade 8 hex head cap screws, flat washers, and lock nuts. The upper latch plate brace will be bolted to the inner body tub panels later in the installation process. Peek through the taillight hole and observe the lower internal brace that was partially installed in the previous step. Install 2 1/4-20 by 1 inch button head cap screws with flat washers and lock nuts to secure the brace using 2 existing holes in the floor of the cavity in the body tub. Tighten these bolts until just before they go snug so that the brace may still move around slightly as further adjustments to the tire carrier are made in later steps. Install the 4 rubber insert bumpers in the provided holes just above each of the alignment cones. Use a dab of grease to help them slip into place. Remove the plastic tailgate hinge covers. The long cover may be removed by firmly grasping it near the pivot side of the hinge, squeezing, and sliding it to the left. Remove the short tailgate hinge covers by spreading the top and bottom apart and pulling away from the tub. Make sure the tailgate is firmly shut and latched. Then use a 10mm wrench to remove the 2 bolts from the tailgate side of the upper hinge. Proceed with a T47 Torx bit to remove the 3 hinge bolts from the body side. Inspect the hinge assembly and note that the hinge pin has a thick head on one end and a thin head on the other. Place the long side of the hinge into a vise with the thin hinge pin head oriented upward. Use a shop rag to protect the paint on the hinge. Use a grinder to remove the head of the hinge pin. Try not to grind too far into the hinge piece itself, although some slight grinding into it is inevitable in order to fully remove the pin head. Use a narrow punch and shop hammer to pound the hinge pin out of the hinge. Observe the 2 hinge brackets provided in the kit. The upper hinge bracket is the one with the slotted hinge pivot holes and cam stop blocks welded to the outside. Install the upper hinge bracket onto the Jeep, reusing the 3 Torx bolts that were removed when the hinge was removed. Reinstall the long side of the hinge using a M10x100 socket head cap screw as the new hinge pin. Secure it with an M10 lock nut and flat washers on the top and bottom. Install a 1/2 inch diameter swing stop sleeve into the upper hinge bracket using 2 5/16 by 3/4 socket head cap screws. At final assembly, apply blue thread locker to the threads. Using a 10mm wrench, reinstall the factory bolts that attach the long side of the hinge to the tailgate. Repeat the previous procedures with the lower hinge. Install the 4 black Delrin bushings into the tube hinge sleeves on the tire carrier main structure. Use a round file to make sure the ends of the tube sleeves are free of burrs. Apply a thin film of grease to the bushing, then tap into place with a mallet. Insert a 3/4 inch inner bushing sleeve into the tire carrier hinge bushings installed in the previous step. Before inserting, deburr and round over any sharp edges at the ends of the sleeve with a file. Apply a thin film of grease to the sleeve, then tap it into place with a mallet. Do this for both the upper and lower bushing hinge assemblies on the tire carrier. With the help of a friend, lift and install the tire carrier main structure into the upper and lower hinge brackets. Insert the 1/2 inch by 4.5 socket head cap screw through the upper adjustment cam into the upper hinge bracket and through the bushing sleeve. Thread the lower adjustment cam nut onto the end of the 1/2 inch bolt where it protrudes through the bottom of the hinge bracket. Leave this assembly finger tight for now. Install a 1/2 inch by 4.5 socket head cap screw with 1/2 inch lock nut and washers into the lower hinge assembly and tighten with a 3/8 inch hex key and 3/4 inch wrench. Attach the threaded tire mount to the inside of the tire carrier main structure using 3 3/8 by 1 inch grade 8 hex head cap screws, lock nuts, and flat washers. Use a pair of 9/16 wrenches to tighten the 3 3/8 by 1 inch hex head cap screws, flat washers, and lock nuts. With the help of a friend, lift the spare tire onto the tire carrier with the outside of the wheel facing the back of the tire carrier away from the Jeep. Slide the tire mount centering cone onto the threaded tire mount, followed by the tire mount wing nut. Thread the wing nut down until it is snug against the tire. The tire may need to be lifted slightly as the wing nut is tightened, so that the cone may properly center the tire. Once the tire is centered, tighten the wing nut as far as it can reasonably be tightened by hand. Pre-install any Rotopax accessories and/or high lift jack. Make sure Rotopax units are full, as they will be in normal use. Once the spare tire and any accessories are installed, close the tire carrier and note that the alignment cones in the latch plate are most likely not correctly aligned with their corresponding holes in the tire carrier main structure. There are 2 adjustments that must be made to perfectly align the alignment cones. To adjust them left to right, simply shift the latch plate left or right as the bolts mounting it to the Jeep's body are in slotted holes and not fully tightened yet. The vertical adjustment is done at the adjustment cams on the upper hinge at the other side of the tire carrier. Note that there are hash marks etched into the upper hinge bracket with an indexing mark etched into the upper adjustment cam. The same markings can be found on the underside of the hinge bracket and the lower adjustment cam nut. Make sure the upper and lower adjustment cams are clocked the same, meaning the index marks on the cams point to the same hash marks on the top and bottom side of the hinge bracket. Note that at this point the large socket head cap screw that runs through the upper hinge assembly should not be fully tightened. With a 7/8 wrench on the upper adjustment cam and a 3/4 inch wrench on the lower adjustment cam, rotate them together to raise or lower the opposite side of the tire carrier until properly aligned with the alignment cones in the latch plate. Adjust the side-to-side positioning of the latch plate and the adjustment cam simultaneously until the alignment cones seat perfectly into the holes in the tire carrier, allowing the tire carrier to shut fully against the latch plate. Once the alignment cones are properly aligned with the corresponding holes in the tire carrier, tighten the upper hinge assembly by holding the lower adjustment cam nut stationary with a 3/4 inch wrench while tightening the large socket head cap screw with a 3/8 inch hex key or driver bit. Take care to keep both adjustment cams stationary and aligned with each other as the bolt is tightened. Use the same tools to tighten the lower hinge assembly. Swing the tire carrier open and fully tighten the 6 3/8 inch grade 8 hex head cap screws that fasten the latch plate to the Jeep's body. Remember, you'll need a 9/16 socket with extension to reach the bolt heads and a 9/16 wrench through the tail light hole to hold the lock nuts while tightening. Slide the T-lock spacer ring onto the T-lock latch assembly and insert the threaded end of the T-lock latch assembly into the round hole in the center of the latch plate part of the tire carrier main structure. On the other side of the plate, install the large lock washer and large jam nut and tighten. Next, install a small jam nut, small lock washer, latch bar, small lock washer, and small jam nut in this order and finger tighten the 2 jam nuts. Close the tire swing and check the T-lock mechanism for proper adjustment. When properly adjusted, the latch bar firmly tightens the tire carrier main assembly against the latch plate. The positioning of the latch bar will likely need to be adjusted several times before properly adjusted. Move the jam nuts back and forth to adjust the positioning of the latch bar. Once everything is properly adjusted, make sure all 3 jam nuts are firmly tightened with wrenches. Open the tailgate and remove the plastic and carpet coverings to reveal the sheet metal on the top surface of the driver's side wheel housing or corner housing. To do so, you may need to remove some tie-down loops as shown here. Peek through the taillight hole and observe the upper internal brace that was partially installed in a previous step and that there are 3 bolt holes in the brace in a triangle arrangement. Holes will need to be drilled in the Jeep's body sheet metal in order to install bolts into these 3 locations. To do so, first an indent must be made at each hole location that is visible on the top side of the sheet metal. The best tool for this would be a 1/4 inch transfer punch and small hammer in order to ensure that the mark is perfectly centered. However, an auto punch or center punch and hammer will also work. Punch the sheet metal from below by reaching through the taillight hole and using your punch tool of choice centered on the 3 hole locations. If you're using an auto punch, several punches may be needed in order to make the dimples visible on the top side. Reuse the punch from the top side on each of the hole locations to invert the punch marks in order to center the drill so the holes can be drilled from the top side. Drill the 3 hole locations, beginning with the 1/8 inch pilot hole and finishing with a 1/4 inch bit. Install the upper internal brace clamp plate using 3 1/4 inch by 3/4 button head cap screws with flat washers and lock nuts to clamp the body sheet metal firmly between the clamp plate and the upper internal brace. Replace all plastic covers and carpets removed from the Jeep's interior. Reinstall the driver's side taillight housing, remembering to plug the taillight pigtail back into the Jeep's wiring harness. Reinstall the factory plastic upper and lower hinge covers. With the tire carrier swung open all the way, open the tailgate slowly until it becomes apparent where the plastic hinge covers will need to be trimmed to allow clearance for the hinge brackets. Use a silver or other light-colored fine-tip felt marker or a scribe to mark the material that will need to be trimmed for clearance. Use a cutting tool of your choice to trim the plastic hinge cover. Reinstall the hinge cover and check for clearance. Trim further as needed. Install the license plate to the center plate of the tire carrier main structure using 4 number 10 by 3/4 inch button head cap screws, flat washers, and lock nuts. If installing Rotopacks, fuel or storage packs, provisions are in place to bolt the Rotopacks pack mounts directly to the tire carrier. The tire carrier is designed to accommodate 2-gallon fluid packs or storage packs on the rear surface at either side of the license plate. Smaller 1-gallon fluid packs may be mounted on either side. Note that mounting a 1-gallon pack on the driver's side will make it a little more difficult, though not impossible, to operate the T-lock handle. A high-lift jack may be installed on the passenger side instead of a 1-gallon Rotopacks by using 2 1/2-inch by 3-inch bolts with washers and wing nuts. A pair of urethane or rubber bushings with 1/2-inch through holes may also be needed in order to space the jack away from the tire carrier.